Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting. And we're working on the Chapter 1 problems, Group B, and we are still working on problem number 37. Let me get down there. All right, we're still working on 1-37B, and we had finished in the last video the preparation of the income statement, so that's done. Right? And again, I'm trying to keep the videos shorter. I talk fast and monotone because I'm trying to get out, but you know, we don't want to be here forever and ever and ever. Okay, so bear with that. And if you're not understanding something, pause the video and watch it again. I mean, I can't stress that enough. And so number 3 says prepare the statement of retained earnings. So let me come down here, and again, not again, but in the exercise problems, I think it was exercise 1 dash, I had said 20, let me back up here, 28B was the income statement, was the balance sheet, and 1-29B was the income statement and the statement of retained earnings. So go back and watch those videos again. As a reminder, if you don't understand what I'm doing as far as formatting wise, formatting is important, but I'm not going to explain every time formatting issues every time I do a new financial statement. If you've been doing the problems, you've already covered this. Okay, so heading for retained earnings, Interior by Jill Inc. Okay, so the name of the statement is Statement of Retained Earnings. Earnings. And the heading date is the same as the income statement for the month ending June 30th, 2014. And of course, the heading is center aligned. Okay, so this is center aligned. All right, now, in the previous video, let me jump up this slide. Okay, notice what I had done as far as formatting was concerned. I wrote down my category of account revenue, then I wrote my expenses. Then I wrote in the accounts, the general ledger accounts themselves, and then finally I put the amounts in the appropriate column and showed the math. That's the easiest way as a process if you want to get accustomed to doing them in a process. I put the heading first. Okay, so I put the heading first, then I wrote my categories, revenues and expenses. Then I listed the ledger accounts, however many there were. Then I put in the amounts in whatever column they pertain to. Then I did the math as the last thing. And of course, I filled in my description here if I needed it with my double underline. But that's kind of like the process I went through. With the statement of retained earnings, you can go through the same process or same type of process. Okay, I'm going to have retained earnings. Come on, I'm going to have retained earnings. And then I'm going to have a beginning date. Okay, you have to put in the beginning date. All right, and it has to be the appropriate date. Okay, the beginning date, now, as a quick aside, if I have an accounting period, okay, and whatever that last day is, okay, my ending date for the previous accounting period becomes my beginning date for the current accounting period, right? And so I have all of my balances in my accounts as of the last day of the previous period. And that becomes, the beginning balances for the next period. And because of that, right, and the reason why I'm going into all of this is because when I put my beginning date, I'm showing the beginning date for this current accounting period. I have too many students who will put in, I see them put in not June 1st, but May 31st as their date. Why? Because what they do is they look at a general ledger trial balance, as a closing trial balance, and on that trial balance the date's going to be May 31st, 2014. And since they're looking at the closing trial balance, those ending figures become the beginning figures for June 1st, right? And so for whatever reason, students have a tendency to write May 31st, and that's the wrong date, okay? It should be the first day of the accounting period, the beginning date of the current accounting period. So further on down, we're going to want to know what our retained earnings are. For the last day of the accounting period. So in this case here, it's going to be June 30th, 2014. Now, we know our beginning in this particular circumstance. We know that from the setup of the problem, it had said, Jill Schultz started the business on June 1st. So on June 1st, we know that we didn't have any retained earnings. Okay, so the balance is going to be 0 for the retained earnings. Now, we know that we're going to add stuff, so I write an add, okay, and then I know I'm going to have less stuff, okay. Well, what am I going to add in, right? Well, I'm going to add in my net income, okay. Why my net income? Well, remember, okay, that my what I have on my income statement here, right, my revenues and expenses less my dividends, has to go into my retained earnings. Okay, they get closed out to the retained earnings. So what's on my income statement? Well, and that's why we created the income statement first, in order to be able to figure out that we had 8810 in profit for the accounting period. So I add in my net income. Oh, what happened there? Okay, I'm going to add in my 8810. Whoops, wrote that wrong. $8,810. Okay, and that's going to give me a subtotal. Okay, now notice that I indented here. Okay, indent for the subtotal. And since I'm looking for a subtotal, that means this is, I have to do the math, which gives me $8,810. Now, an argument could be made that I could have put these numbers in the left-hand column and then put the total of 8810 in the right-hand column, and that's true. But when it comes to the statement of retained earnings, as we're reading straight down the page, we don't have any real big subsets. I mean, we have two numbers that we're adding together, right? That's what the underline is for. It says we're adding it together. And then we're going to have less our dividends of $1,500. And that's just two numbers that we're going to be doing a mathematical calculation for. So we draw the underline to show that calculation. But because it's only two numbers and this is only two numbers, we could put everything in one column. But if I had 3 or 4 numbers, I would, as part of the mathematical calculation, I might consider moving it to the left one, okay? And then putting a total in, right? But for the simplistic statement of retained earnings, we generally are going to show everything in one column, right? So 8810 less our 1500 in dividends means we have a total of $7,310. That's our retained earnings as of June 30th, our ending retained earnings. And we draw a double underline to show that's the end of the calculation. Okay, so that's it for the statement of retained earnings. Simple, right? Just like for the income statement, one, follow the process. One, create your heading. Two, write in the beginning, write in retained earnings and the beginning date. Then write in 3, retained earnings and the end date. Then 4, add, right? Whatever you need to add. And then 5, subtotal it. Then 6, well, actually, let me back up there. 4, write my add. 5, write my less. 6, write my subtotal. And of course, 7, put in the numbers and do the math and double underline at the end. Right? So if you're going to follow a process, that's generally the process that you're going to go through. Okay, and get accustomed to doing it. I realize you're going to get more work. You're going to do this quite a few more times. So start becoming accustomed to that process. So that's the statement of retained earnings. And I will move into the next video and work on the balance sheet.